Thanks for joining me for an annotated listen to the Cole Porter classic, All of You, as performed by Miles Davis with his first great quintet. This is off of Davis's Columbia Records debut, Round About Midnight, which was released in 1957. All of You is the last track on the first side of the album, and it can be overshadowed in the ears of many listeners by the other two songs on side one. The album opens with the Thelonious Monk classic, Round Midnight, which is a very slow, very atmospheric tune. And it's a really powerful song, but it's also important historically to Miles Davis and fans of Davis because Miles Davis's performance of this tune at the 1955 Newport Jazz Festival is really what launched him back into the public eye with fans and journalists and also record executives after a period of absence. Columbia Records exec George Avakian was present at that performance, and that began a series of conversations that would ultimately culminate in Davis's move from Prestige Records to Columbia Records, where he would spend most of his career. The second track on Round About Midnight is a Charlie Parker bebop classic, A Lucha. And this is a fun listen because it shows the Davis hard bop quintet sensibility mapped onto a bebop standard. They've mastered the bebop language, but all of the players move fluidly into and out of it at will and create a sense of space and band interaction that isn't necessarily present in shorter classic bebop recordings of the tune. Which leaves us with All of You. It's not fast, it's not slow, it's not moody, it's not exuberant. So what does it have to offer for us? Well, let's dive in and find out in 3, 2, 1, now. The first thing you might notice is Miles Davis's use of the Harmon mute with the plunger removed, which gives the trumpet its really restrained nasal quality here. If you've listened to Miles Davis, you may have heard the same tone before, as he used it frequently throughout his career. Now let's have a listen to the rhythm section underneath Miles Davis. Philly Joe Jones on the drums, playing with brushes and a nice swishy soft feel. Paul Chambers playing bass. You can hear Paul Chambers' bass really is primarily one note every 2 beats. Just this nice loping feel. Bum, bum, bum. And pianist Red Garland also playing softly behind just occasional chord stabs. This is called comping. One of the interesting things to listen for will be how the playing of the rhythm section changes once the feel of the solo changes from Miles Davis's mute to John Coltrane's tenor saxophone playing. As you'll hear, Coltrane has a different tone, a different soloing sensibility, and it's going to require something a little bit different from the rhythm section. Here's John Coltrane. Before we get to Coltrane's actual playing, let's observe that Philly Joe Jones has switched from brushes to sticks, and he's playing his famous Philly lick. The Philly lick is sticks on the ride cymbal, and the snare drum is getting hit with a rim shot every 4 beats. It's propulsive without being intrusive. We can also hear that Paul Chambers' bass playing is now essentially doubled in speed, and he's playing 1 note every beat. And almost as if to keep the song from getting carried away, because you can hear how energetic Coltrane's soloing is, Red Garland's chord playing is more or less unchanged here. Now John Coltrane's playing Definitely bebop influence. You can hear the sheer preponderance of notes moving up and down the range of the instrument. But there's a space here that wouldn't necessarily be present in the playing of a classic bebop performance. And like Miles Davis, John Coltrane leaves lots of spaces. Ideas are explored, pause is given, and another idea is explored. And here comes the handoff to pianist Red Garland. Something to listen for will be how he solos. And you can hear that, Red Garland almost can't wait to play something fast, something virtuosic. Of course, he's the only soloist that also has rhythm duties. You can hear the chords in the left hand still. But the solo begins with such fire, and maybe that's because Miles Davis chose Red Garland to be the piano player in this quintet because of Red Garland's ability to sound like Chicago pianist Ahmad Jamal. And I think if Ahmad Jamal had been based in New York, we wouldn't be hearing Red Garland here. Red Garland wasn't always happy to be asked to pretend to be Ahmad Jamal. So even though this block style of chord he's playing right now is characteristic of that Jamal style, to me it almost sounds like Red Garland wanted to begin his solo asserting what he could do, how he wanted to play. And now we can hear that super melodic right hand melody has been really pulled back, and it's become more restrained. And he's leaving the types of space that Miles Davis and John Coltrane left in their own solo. And as Garland prepares to hand it back to Miles Davis to close the song out, let's listen to Philly Joe. He's going to hit the snare. And there you can hear an important sixth member. The echo you may have heard on the drums there is the famous echo of the Columbia Records studios in New York. This is not only where Miles Davis recorded Round About Midnight, and where he would also go on to record Kind of Blue, but it's also where Glenn Gould recorded his Goldberg variations, and it's the home of several important recordings throughout Columbia Records history. The room was famous for its echo. It was a converted Russian Orthodox church, and in that moment when Philly Joe cracks the snare, we get a sense of the character of the room. All of You doesn't have the brooding emotion of Round Midnight. It doesn't have the fire of Alu Cha, but there's definitely a lot on offer. Thanks for joining me for All of You. That's the real sleeper hit for me on Round About Midnight, because you can hear so much about the band's character and personality, the way the rhythm section changes to support the soloist, the way Red Garland appears to really bristle at the block chords and start his solo with such fire. And of course, that Ahmad Jamal-esque block playing seems to have played a pretty significant part in the disintegration of the first great quintet. Miles Davis and Red Garland would famously get into an argument in the recording of their next quintet album for Columbia, Milestones, in which Red would take exception to Miles Davis's suggestions for exactly how to play the chords on Sid's Ahead and storm out of the studio. Miles Davis would then go on to play the chords himself on Sid's Ahead and that was the beginning of the end of their relationship. That block chord playing style stayed stuck in Miles Davis's head, and after Ray Garland's departure from the Miles Davis Quintet, the next piano player to join would be Bill Evans. Evans's block chords and sensitive touch would be a key component to the sound of Miles Davis's album Kind of Blue. And although he was uncredited as such, Evans was also an important creative collaborator in the writing of many of those songs. So that's All of You. It's a great window into the early days of the Miles Davis Quintet on Columbia Records that provides a fascinating glimpse into some things that wouldn't come into fruition for several years to come. Thanks for listening.